Welcome to The Explainer, where we dig into complex topics by going straight to the original source material.
Today, we are diving deep into the decades-long, very complicated relationship between Donald Trump and Russia. Now, this is a story that really hinges on one big question: ally or asset? The thing is, depending on which intelligence reports and geopolitical analyses you look at, you get two completely different answers. So we're going to lay out the evidence for both sides, letting the source material do the talking.
So here's how we're going to tackle this. We're actually going to start in the future, looking at what a hypothetical second Trump term might look like based on these analyses. Then, we're going to hit rewind and trace this whole story back 40 years to see how we got here in the first place. Okay, so let's jump ahead to a potential 2025. According to several of these sources, a second Trump term could kick off a pretty radical transformation of America's entire national security apparatus. We're talking about a fundamental change in how the U.S. sees the world and its enemies.
A second term would probably kick off with some key appointments, bringing in some new faces that could totally reshape the intelligence and diplomatic world. We're talking about figures who have, some pretty controversial and sometimes Russia-friendly takes on U.S. foreign policy.
And this change in people is expected to lead to a big change in priorities. The annual threat assessment, which is a huge deal in the intelligence community, would reportedly get a major rewrite. Russia would get bumped way down the list of threats. And the new focus? Things like border security and fentanyl trafficking.
This policy shift doesn't happen without some drama, though. A whistleblower complaint surfaces, alleging that DNI Gabbard personally got her hands on an NSA report about someone close to the president. But instead of following the rules and telling Congress, she allegedly handed a physical copy directly to the White House. This, of course, raises some really serious questions about politicizing intelligence.
At the very same time, you've got senior advisor Elon Musk reportedly having a direct line to Vladimir Putin. According to these sources, these back-channel calls are happening regularly, and it's making U.S. intelligence agencies extremely nervous. I mean, you have to remember, this is a guy with huge government access and critical Pentagon contracts for his companies. This brings us to a whole new department, the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, headed by Musk. And according to a whistleblower, this new department has a massive data problem. We're talking about 10 gigabytes of sensitive info allegedly being pulled from the National Labor Relations Board and put onto unsecured servers.
The security failures were apparently pretty shocking. One IT engineer claimed DOGE teams just flat-out disabled security monitoring tools. And almost right away, what happens? Login attempts from a Russian IP address, using brand new valid credentials. And it wasn't a one-off thing. Similar issues were later found at the Social Security Administration, putting the personal info of millions of people at risk.
You can see this potential new direction in foreign policy, too. There's a proposed 28-point peace plan for Ukraine, negotiated by Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, who, by the way, is a real estate developer, not a diplomat. And when you put it side by side with Russia's demands, it's incredibly similar. It includes basically accepting Russian control of territory and a U.S. promise to block Ukraine from joining NATO.
So how did we even get to this point? To understand the context for all of these projections, you have to go back, way back, to the very start of this 40-year saga.
Okay, so according to declassified files and former Eastern Bloc spies, this whole thing kicks off in 1977. Czechoslovakian intelligence starts keeping tabs on Trump and his first wife, Ivana. This gets the attention of the KGB, who apparently start this long, slow process of cultivation, which all leads up to a trip to Moscow in 1987. Now there's a word that is absolutely central to this entire story: kompromat. It's a Russian term, and it basically means compromising material. It can be real, it can be fake, but its purpose is to be used for blackmail, for leverage, to make sure someone stays loyal. It's a classic intelligence tool. And intelligence sources make a really important distinction here. They allege that Trump wasn't seen as a formal agent, someone who's ideologically on board. He was viewed as a useful asset. That's someone who just acts out of their own self-interest, but their actions happen to line up with what a foreign government wants. So less a partner for life, more a friend with benefits.
So for decades, this was all happening behind the scenes. And then, bam, the 2016 presidential election happens. And this whole long history just explodes into public view, triggering a whole bunch of investigations that took over the headlines for years.
So analysts started looking for potential compromat, for financial leverage. And they pointed to a few things. The secret project to build a Trump Tower in Moscow during the campaign, at the same time he was publicly denying any business in Russia. Also, an $8 million loan his media company got from Kremlin-linked groups, and of course, the massive debts his campaign manager Paul Manafort owed to a Russian oligarch.
Right, so the key point here, according to the House Intelligence Committee, wasn't just the business deal itself. The real leverage was the lie. The Kremlin knew he was pursuing the deal in secret while denying in public, and that gave them a huge pressure point.
This brings us to the Mueller report. This number, 11, represents the number of episodes of potential obstruction of justice by President Trump that the report detailed in its second volume. The investigation was looking into whether there were attempts to influence or even stop the Russia probe itself.
But the final conclusion from the Mueller report on obstruction was famously tricky. See, there's a Department of Justice policy that says you can't indict a sitting president. So the report laid out a mountain of evidence, but it stopped short of making a criminal accusation, basically leaving the question open.
Well, that ambiguity didn't last long. Attorney General William Barr released his own 4-page summary, and he made the conclusions that the report itself deliberately avoided. Barr declared no obstruction, and he left out Mueller's key phrase that the report does not exonerate him. As you can imagine, this created a huge controversy and a real battle over public perception. In response to all of these investigations, a very powerful counter-narrative started to build. It basically reframed the entire scandal, not as a national security threat, but as a political fabrication, a story cooked up to take down a president.
This counter-narrative says the whole thing was a coup started by political enemies. The heart of this argument is the Durham report, which focused heavily on unverified Russian intelligence that suggested the Clinton campaign just invented the whole Russia story. And in that hypothetical second term we talked about, the plan would be to declassify a ton of documents to prove this hoax narrative.
So after all these years of investigations, reports, and crazy political fights, the source materials don't really give us a clean answer. What we're left with are two completely conflicting ways of interpreting the exact same events.
And really, that's what you should take away from all this. It's not a simple answer. It's an understanding of these two clashing realities. One story is about a long game of intelligence cultivation by foreign power. The other story is about a politically motivated hoax cooked up by rivals at home.
The sources that we've gone through today, they provide a lot of evidence and a lot of arguments to back up both of these narratives. They don't give a final conclusion. They leave the true nature of this 40-year relationship as a subject of really intense and ongoing debate.
This entire explainer was built by synthesizing a whole range of geopolitical analyses and investigative reports.
You can always explore these documents for yourself to dive even deeper into the details we've covered today. Thanks for joining us.